Hello and welcome to another Vanguard Zero video. So today I'm thinking we're going to be talking about the hotly contested, the hotly debated, the topic everyone seems to be talking about, and that's which triggers should you run. Now I'm just using my Spike Brothers deck just for visual reference right now, but we will be talking about how the triggers apply to each clan too, not just Spike Brothers, so don't worry about that. So yes, let's talk about the triggers. So immediately, the first thing I'm going to say is that I don't think that there's any one combination of triggers that will get you the most wins. I think that it's definitely subject to what kind of deck you're running and a lot of other factors too, and what you're comfortable with. So we'll talk about triggers, and I feel like I need to pitch in here because I feel like I've got a few different opinions than some other people out there. I'm not just going to say what everyone else does. So I'm sure that's going to start an argument in and of itself in the comments and everything, but whatever. It seems to be a topic everyone's passionate about, huh? So, immediately, right, let's just say what each trigger does, and then we'll explain what makes them good and bad, and then we'll explain what combinations I think work for different decks. So, first of all, the crit triggers. If you pull a crit during an attack, then your Vanguard does 2 damage instead of 1 for that turn. Pretty simple stuff. Draw trigger, if you pull it, you get to draw a card. Stand trigger, you get to stand a unit up that is resting, allowing you to get another attack in if you want to. And heal triggers heal you if you have more damage or the same amount as your opponent. And all of them each allow you to give 5,000 power to any unit on your side of the field. So pretty simple stuff, right? Pretty simple stuff. So let's go through the heal triggers first, because I feel like they're the most obvious one. They're the one that everyone seems to be on the same page about. Basically, you want to run 4 triggers. Everyone, I don't really see any example where you don't want to be running 4 triggers. In fact, it's the trigger that's so much better than the others that they physically will not allow you to run more than 4. The other ones you can run up to 9 of, but heals, they're so good that you can only run 4 of. And so that's a sign in and of itself. Heal triggers are just very, very useful. They help you stay in the game, they allow you to take hits and recover that damage back. Basically, heal triggers, really, really good. The only downside to them, of course, is pulling them when you don't need them. So if you're in a situation where you actually have less damage than your opponent, then it won't do anything, which does indeed make the game a little more balanced, but it also can be pretty frustrating. But other than that, that's pretty much the only downside to heal triggers. So next we're going to go to draw triggers, because draw triggers are also fairly simple, and they're the one that seems to be everyone's favorite in Vanguard Zero right now. And that's because they let you draw a card. Now, as we'll get to with the crits and stands, draw triggers are probably the only trigger that you always want to pull no matter what, right? Even heal triggers, you don't want to pull a heal trigger if you have less damage than your opponent. You want to save them for when you have more damage than your opponent, so that you can actually take advantage of their effect. Whereas draw triggers, you can always take advantage of their effect. There's only one scenario where you can't, and that's if it's your 6th piece of damage and you're doing a damage check. And that's it. Every other time in the game, no matter what, if you get a draw trigger, then you're benefiting from it. Even if the 5,000 damage isn't really helping you or anything, just the draw in and of itself can be helpful. You can draw a card that will help you turn the game around. And in this game specifically, having draw power is really, really good, because unlike in the trading card game, you can't put drive check cards in your hand. You have to put them in the drop zone. So you kind of have to make up for that lack of draw power somehow, and the easy way of doing that is to just go all in on draw triggers. And so a lot of people, and the most talked about kind of combination I always see is everyone always says go for 9 draws and 4 heals. When in doubt, if you don't know what else to do, just go for 9 draws and 4 heals, because you can't usually fail. And I do agree that's the safest method, but I don't necessarily think it's always the best. Now I do think that yes, you do need that draw power, so you're gonna want to run draw triggers. but I don't necessarily think it's always the best to have 9. I've actually, as someone who runs Oracle Think Tank and Spike Bros, I've actually had situations where I very quickly kind of come up to the 9 card limit in my hand quite often, and I feel like a lot of that is because of the draw trigger. And so there's kind of a downside there, a downside not a lot of people actually talk about, and that's hitting the hand limit. If you have 9 cards in your hand and you draw another card, you actually have to put that card immediately in your drop zone instead of drawing it to your hand. And that's bad, because that card that you just drew might have been a game changer. That might have been the card you want, especially if you're playing a budget deck and you only have like 1 copy of your triple rare. That could be that triple rare completely wasted for no reason other than you having too many draws. And so I don't necessarily think running 9 draws is always going to get you where you want. Now again, if you really don't know what triggers to go for, then yes, you will usually benefit from 9 draws for heals, because it is the safest one to go for, and you can definitely get wins with that, but I don't necessarily think it's the best. So now we're going to talk about crits, and I'm kind of a crit defender, because crit triggers are kind of bashed a lot in this game. So, for a few reasons, right? The first reason is that they're kind of nerfed. Well, actually, both of the reasons are that they're kind of nerfed. See, crits are a lot better in the trading card game than they are in Vanguard Zero, right? And the first of these reasons is that when you pull a crit or a stand trigger in the trading card game, you can assign the effect and the power individually to any unit on your side of the field. So you can stand any unit on your side of the field, and you can give the power to a different unit on that field. And in the trading card game, same thing applies to crit triggers. You can apply the crit to any unit on your field, as well as the power. Vanguard Zero, that's not the case. You can apply the crit immediately gets applied to your Vanguard no matter what, and this creates for a very different playstyle. If you're playing crits, then you do not want to be hitting the rare guard with your Vanguard, because if you pull that crit, it won't do anything, because of course crits apply damage, and well, if you are attacking the rare guard, you're not applying damage to your opponent, you're just getting rid of that rare guard. And so it's very, very easy to waste a crit, because yeah, if you attack a rare guard and you get a crit, then you can't just give that crit to one of your rare guards and attack their Vanguard and then still get that crit through. No. You have to use that on your Vanguard, which is very, very limiting. And the second reason, the one that everyone always talks about even more, is that perfect guards are automated in Vanguard Zero. So, for example, you can't choose when you want to use your perfect guard, unlike in the trading card game. In the trading card game, you can basically always use the perfect guard as long as you are willing to discard a card from hand. And that's basically it, right? If you can discard a card from your hand, then you can use the perfect guard in any attack you want to, no matter what. However, in Vanguard Zero, the perfect guards work automatically. Now, they work automatically if an attack is about to bring you to 6 damage, or if a crit could bring you to 5 or more damage. And that's the important thing. So, to demonstrate this, for example, if you are at 3 damage, and then your opponent gets a crit, which means that they would be doing 2 damage, and the attack goes through, that would bring you to 5 damage, right? Well, in that case, if you have a perfect guard, it will automatically block the crit and keep you at 3 damage, right? This is bad for crits, because it kind of defeats the purpose of them, right? Because it's like, well, now both of the crits, like, you know, both of the pieces of damage got blocked, whereas if I didn't have a crit, at least one of those pieces of damage would have still went through. And I agree, that's kind of a big downside. That's not great. However, and this is the way I look at it, first of all, crits still work before that point, right? If your opponent doesn't have very much damage, getting a crit still works. So if you get a crit on your first or second turn, that can put you in a pretty significant lead that your opponent might not be able to make back. You know, it puts you in control of the pace and the flow of the game really, really early on, and that can do some really great things for you. It can open up some options, it can make you play more recklessly, and still stay ahead. And I value this. I value having the control and the pace of a game. If I feel like my opponent is the one in control of that game, then most times I will lose. It's very rarely I can come back from the opponent having an early lead. And maybe that's just my play style, but that's just the case, right? And so being able to get a crit on your first turn and do an extra bit of damage that they won't be able to block because they haven't taken enough damage to block it yet, that's good. And the second thing is, I like using crits to waste their perfect guard. See, that's the thing, you only have up to 4 perfect guards per deck. And chances are, they might not even draw all 4 of them throughout the game. It depends how long a game goes for and how draw power heavy their deck is. Or even if they just have cards like Mecha Trainer that allows them to specifically add a perfect guard to their hand. But so on and so forth, right? Well, I feel like if they have perfect guards in their hand, they're going to have to waste them anyway. And so I like having the peace of mind of knowing, oh yes, you know, they're only at 3 damage and I didn't get to do those extra 2 bits of damage, but at least I wasted their perfect guard. And to me, I value that, right? Because if they're going to be relying on perfect guards, the best way of getting around that, other than just using Silent Tom, is to just force them to waste their perfect guards anyway. And crits are a really good way of forcing them to waste their perfect guards earlier than they would have otherwise been willing to do. Is it the most efficient way of doing it? Probably not, but once again, it brings me back to my idea of like controlling the pace of the game. And by forcing them to get rid of their crits early, you're kind of throwing them off, and now they don't have that backup. And again, there's a very real chance they might only have 1 or 2 perfect guards in their hand anyway, and so that's good. Being able to get rid of it while they're only at 3 damage is really good, because now they're just like, well, I guess I hope I get another one. And that's why I'm a crit defender. I don't think you should run 9 crits unless you're playing against the AI in the story mode or character fights or anything like that, because you can use them to cheese it. And that's something I've discussed in the past. But yeah, if you're playing against a human opponent who has perfect guards, then yes, 9 crits is a bit overkill. But I do think that you can't really lose when running 4 crits. Now again, that's just my playstyle, and again, it does definitely... I think a lot of that is due to the fact that I used to run Oracles a lot, and Oracle Think Tank aren't exactly the most brute force clan in the world, because the way I would do it, right, is because, you know, Oracle Think Tank, they're not really known for high damage powers, especially the Amaterasu deck. And so what I would do is, to get around the fact that I wasn't dealing all too much damage, is I would use different abilities such as Amaterasu's to make sure I draw a crit, which would make up for the fact that I wasn't dealing much damage. And so it kind of balanced off. Like, yeah, I could run draws, but Oracle Think Tank are already pretty decent when it comes to kind of milling the deck anyway, right? And so definitely run some, but I don't think you need 9. And so that's where I'm at, and I guess I'll talk about stands too. Stands are the ones I had the least experience with, and they're my least favorite of the 4. I definitely can understand why they're viable, especially to someone who's like a Nova Grappler or whatever. But to me, the downsides outweigh the upsides. So, and that's the thing, it's personal preference, right? Whichever triggers work for you, work for you. And so you kind of have to weigh up the positives and negatives and find a combination that you're comfortable with. And I think as long as that combination has 4 heals in it, then it's going to be fine, you know? But the problem with stand triggers is that if you're going to be benefiting from a stand trigger, you'll have to have already attacked, right? So I guess the preferred combination when it comes to stand triggers is you start your turn, you attack with one of your front rear guards, you attack with another front rear guard, you attack with your vanguard, you pull a stand trigger, you stand one of your front rear guards, and then you boost that front rear guard to get an extra attack in. And on paper, that sounds great. The problem is that I'm always using up my boosts. And that's not even half of it, right? If you're getting that many attacks in and you're hoping to get another attack in by standing, then, well, every time your opponent's Vanguard takes damage, that Vanguard gets a power boost of at least 5,000, maybe even another 5,000 if they pull a trigger. And if you're doing that many attacks, they're bound to pull a trigger eventually. Which means that by the time you're getting a fourth potential attack in, they already have a ridiculous amount of power, and even if you do still have your boost behind your front rear guard, that's still not going to do all too much, right? And yeah, sure, you do have the power you get from the stand trigger, but again, a lot of time that still isn't enough. You need a ridiculous amount of power if you want to actually fully capitalize upon the stand trigger. Now, of course, there is another use, right? And the other use is, okay, just don't attack the Vanguard then, use it to take out a rear guard. But the problem with this too is that, well, most of the time you're going to be, if you want to take out the rear guard, you'd be doing that before you attack the Vanguard anyway, because the most important front rear guards are the intercepts. So it can be useful, don't get me wrong, but I don't find it quite as useful as a crit, because yeah, sure, stand triggers are more difficult to block with a perfect guard, and if you do block it, you're only blocking 1 damage rather than 2 with the crit. It's just not very often I benefit from them, and I understand I do need to play with them a lot. For example, you can see on screen here, if there's any card in the game that would benefit from stand triggers, it would be someone like Juggernaut, who can Soul Blast to get 5,000 extra damage and has an 11k starting off anyway. So even if you don't have a boost, that's 16k. So if you're standing him up over and over again, then yeah, maybe someone like him would benefit from him. And, that's why I would maybe bet. And that's the thing, again, it depends on the clan you're running too. Because Nova Grapplers, yeah, they can benefit from stands. And same thing goes for Spike Brothers, right? I don't personally run stands for Spike Brothers. But, for example, with a clan like Nova Grappler, where you can consistently stand up your back rear guards quite a lot, that does mean that if you get a stand trigger, you can boost the units in front. And that's cool, because there are a lot of grade 1 units in Nova Grappler that can stand themselves anyway. And so yeah, I can see why stands are useful, but I definitely feel like they're very high risk, high reward, because I feel like they're the least successful ones, and they can give you high returns, but I still don't always find that worth it, in my opinion. And so that's why my usual go-to, and you can see it on screen right now, my usual go-to whenever I run any clan is 4 heals, 5 draws, and 4 crits. And the reason for this is because 5 draws still gives you that draw power. You still seem to be drawing enough cards to get you by. Maybe not quite as much as 9 draw triggers will get you, of course, but it's still quite a lot, right? 4 heals is self-explanatory. I get to heal myself the maximum amount of times the game will let me. That's a good thing. And then 4 crits, genuinely, I've gotten those crits a lot. And there have been games where the opponent is at 4 damage, and I know for a fact that I can only get 1 more attack in that turn, and if I don't survive this turn, then I'm probably not going to survive the game. So I attack and I get a crit and I win, right? Because my previous attacks had already used up their perfect guards, and that's another situation where crits are really good. And genuinely, even though there's only 4 of them in the deck, I'm still pulling them pretty consistently. Now, of course, there's the dreaded defensive crit, and the defensive crit is when you draw a critical trigger on your opponent's turn when they're attacking you during a damage check. And yeah, that can be a pain in the ass, don't get me wrong. But I still think that 4 crits is enough that you're gonna get at least 1 or 2 of them through successfully per game. And that can change a game, right? That means that you can kind of afford to put all of your eggs into one basket, and it gives you some more leeway and room to take out rare guards and all that other stuff and not really worry about the fact that you're not doing all too much damage. And yes, enough to burn through your opponent's perfect guards, right? At least that's my opinion. So, yeah. Again, I think it varies depending on the kind of deck you're running and everything. Like, like always, you gotta use triggers that work hand in hand with your deck, not ones that work against them. For example, if you have a card like Perfect Riser or Dayusha that gives the card a crit anyway, just via card effect, then you probably don't need to run crit triggers because it's redundant, right? If you pull a crit trigger while you're playing with Perfect Riser, then yeah, that gives you an extra crit on top of that, but that makes it even more blockable, right? So I feel like, again, it depends on the deck, right? Like a Perfect Riser deck would probably benefit more from the other 3 triggers anyway. Only other piece of advice I would give you is preferably don't run all 4 triggers. That's also something I feel like everyone's like, well, I gotta run, at least a couple of every trigger. And I'm like, no, you don't. You really, really don't, because that makes it too randomized for my liking. You want to make it so that the deck is built around a specific strategy, a strategy you can consistently hit at each game, or if you don't, you at least have a backup plan. And if you have any less than 4 of a trigger, then you're not going to be able to consistently get it. So I would say run 3 triggers and run it at a 4-5-4 kind of ratio, or just run 2, right? But if you're running 2, then preferably the second one will be draws rather than crits, because 9 crits again is a bit overkill and makes the deck feel very kind of RNG. Which again, hey, maybe if you want an RNG deck, but I don't think you're going to be getting very successful ranked mode results if you're relying on such an RNG style deck. So I don't know. But those are those are triggers. I'm stumbling on my words. I'm sorry. I've been talking for 20 minutes now. But that's my thoughts on crits. Again, the reason I felt the need to make this video is because I've seen similar discussions about triggers, and every single version of that discussion I have seen has ended at the point where someone's gone, just play 9 draws and 4 heals. And that's it, right? That's what every discussion when it comes to triggers kind of goes to in Vanguard Zero. Everyone's like, what triggers should I run? And another person's like, 9 draws and 4 heals, and then that's it. That's the entire conversation. I don't know, I feel like there's a little bit more to discuss there. I feel like you're kind of undermining the entire trigger system just by always defaulting that. Now, of course, if you just want wins and you don't know what triggers to go for, 9 draws and 4 heals will safely get you there, right? But I do think that I am more comfortable with my 4 crits, 5 draws, and 4 heals combo. But again, that's just me. That's just what I like doing. I'd like to see what triggers you like going for in the description, comments. Not the description, god damn it, I'm stumbling on my words again. And yeah, I'd like to hear what triggers you use in the comments, and be sure to subscribe and come back for more Vanguard Zero videos if you like them. If you don't, then feel free to just not. I'm not forcing you. And I'll see you later with some more Vanguard Zero.